Hello everyone, this is Amber at Hoosier Hypnosis, back with another long form video for this week. Um, I want to continue talking about what we talked about last week, so feel free to scroll back through my page if you missed it. We were talking about process emotion theory and how our brains are essentially these basic big prediction machines. And I got to thinking about how that relates to some of the specific things that we experience with anxiety, particularly trauma. And I started ruminating on all those things and found myself being caught up in those feelings again. And then I had to stop myself. I'm going to backtrack a little bit before I get back to those big emotions. There was a time in my life where I constantly, all the time, just felt like I was overly dramatic. I'd have these reactions that felt like they were nuclear level over things that, looking back, were really, really small. Um, and I beat myself up for it. Why can't I just be or feel normal? And eventually, I learned about hypnosis and I learned more about psychology. I got my master's. I learned about emotional memory, process prediction, and all of these things. And what I realized is that my body wasn't overreacting, it was reacting to things that had already happened in the past. Those things were still affecting me today. And to some extent I feel like we all know this. We all have had those moments, consciously or unconsciously. And looking back, you may recognize that it's related to something that you experienced, or if you're not very introspective, maybe you've never looked at it. Now, getting back to what we were talking about last week. Process emotion theory says these emotions aren't reactions, they're these predictions. Your brain takes a bodily sensation and a past experience and constructs it as an emotion, creates those chemicals, floods your system with it, and you get stuck in that feeling for however long you fixate on it. Trauma is the experience of your prediction model getting trained on pure survival data and then never getting updated. It just continues to run off this old pattern, even though new things are happening to you because you're so focused on it. And I'm not saying that you did anything wrong. We all do it. Our brain prioritizes things that are a risk to our well being. And so, again, it's not that you did anything wrong, but there are ways to change it. And like I mentioned last week, it doesn't have to be one big thing. It can be 1,000 tiny cuts, 100 small lessons that my nervous system always interpreted as a threat. I was always under constant hypervigilance internally because we were afraid of those things happening again. And so it decided that everything was dangerous, and I lived like that for a very long time. Now, there are things that you can do. And I want to explain a little bit about this technique before I explain how to do it. What we have to do is retrain our brain to work off a different pattern, which means that we have to teach it that thing that resembled something from the past, even slightly. We have to train it that that's no longer the case. Because currently your brain sees something similar and launches that same survival program over and over again. You could hear a tone of voice that reminds you of that person that did that thing, a feeling that you felt while that scary situation was occurring. Your brain matches for the smallest part of that pattern, or sometimes the biggest part, and predicts the outcome. And your body can't tell the difference between time, just like it can't tell the difference between fantasy and reality. Do you know this? Your unconscious can't determine the difference. It thinks that that daydream is as real as what you are experiencing now watching this video. And the same is true every time it pulls up that old prediction. It can't tell the time. It can't tell that that's then and this is now. So your nervous system thinks that it's protecting you. from then. But it's not then. We're in the now. And we can't stay present because we're either worried about what has come before or how that's going to affect us in the future. So let me give you a technique that I use to help me in these moments. Because I used to have these big reactions all the time and I would get stuck in them for hours because I just couldn't stop focusing on them. It would leave me in tears and hysterics. And it's not a hypnotic technique, but it is a good one to have under your belt. When you feel that urge the next time, that too big reaction, stop and name it. I know it is incredibly hard to stop. Stopping is the hardest part of this, but I know you can do it. I want you to name it. And then I want you to remind yourself, this is old data. That data is from then, not now. So why does this work? Well, for one, you're interrupting the prediction before it becomes a full-blown catastrophe or emotion, before you're so flooded with those chemicals that your brain can't stop. That's why the hard part is stopping and naming it. But you're also giving your mind new data. Data that it can take to create a new prediction. And the more you do this, the more you stop that before it starts, the more that new prediction takes hold. It's kind of like building a fire. It starts with the tiniest spark, and every time you feed it, it gets bigger. Every time you choose to remind yourself that that's then and you're living in the now, you're building that new fire. It gets stronger, it gets brighter, and it gets easier. I still have moments where then hijacks now, but now most of the time I can recognize when that's happening. And I promise you, it changes everything. And I don't know where you are in your own journey, to your own mental health. You may be incredibly healthy and just have this one last problem. Or you might be where I started, where everything was a hot mess and it hurt all the time. I don't care where you are in your journey. If you want to talk about updating your prediction model, you know where to find me. And even if it's not with hypnosis, I can point you in the direction of other things that will be able to help you as well. Directions you might seek. But it starts with one action. And that one action builds and builds and builds until it's a snowball. And you realize 10 years later, it's changed your entire life. Sorry, I didn't mean to get all teary. But thinking about how much my life has changed with hypnosis and learning all of these things, I want more people to have that experience, to live in that reality where they found the thing that clicked and it changed their world. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but over time, fundamentally changed how you live. I'm going to leave you there. There'll be 2 shorts later in the week. I hope you enjoyed this one, and I hope you have a great week. Bye.